The city felt like a dream painted in sunlight. Whitewashed buildings clung to cliffs, their balconies spilling over with vines and bougainvillea. The air smelled of salt and citrus. And somewhere down the hill, waves kept folding into themselves like whispered secrets. I came here alone. That was the point. After years of constant noise, deadlines, dinners, polite conversations that meant nothing, I wanted to hear my own thoughts again. So I booked the trip, packed light, and told no one where I was going. A solo escape, a clean page. He appeared on the first morning, standing beside the van that would take a handful of us on a local tour. He couldn't have been more than 22, maybe 23. Sunlit skin, sharp jaw, dark hair that fell into his eyes when he smiled. He wore a black short-sleeved shirt, the top button undone, a camera slung across his chest. "Good morning, everyone," he said, voice low but easy. "I'm your guide for today." When his gaze reached me, it paused. Only for a second, but it was enough to change the air between us. I gave a polite smile, the one that keeps people from guessing what you're thinking. "Good morning," he nodded, that faint grin never leaving his lips. "You're traveling solo?" "Yes." "Brave," he said, adjusting the strap of his camera. "Or just tired of company?" I didn't answer. He laughed softly, like he already knew. The van climbed narrow roads that curled along the cliffs. He spoke about history, ruins, traditions, but every so often he'd glance into the rearview mirror, eyes catching mine. I told myself it was nothing, just curiosity. Still, I found myself watching him. The way sunlight touched his forearms as he gestured, the casual confidence in his movements. There was an openness about him, the kind that comes from not yet being afraid of mistakes. At one stop, we walked through an ancient courtyard where the sea glittered between arches of crumbling stone. The others wandered ahead, taking pictures. I stayed behind, tracing the pattern of light on the marble floor. "You like quiet places," he said, suddenly beside me. "I like places that don't need words," I replied. He smiled, leaning on the stone rail beside me. "Most people come here for the photos." I came here to remember how sunlight feels. Something flickered in his expression. A recognition, maybe. "Then I think you chose the right city." For a moment, neither of us moved. The breeze lifted my hair. His hand brushed against mine on the rail. Barely, accidentally. But it sent a current through me so sharp it felt like confession. At lunch, the group spread out over a terrace overlooking the sea. He sat across from me, the sun caught in his eyes, turning them the color of amber. "You remind me of someone," he said suddenly. "Is that your line for tourists?" He chuckled. "No, she was my art teacher years ago. She used to look at things the way you do, like she saw more than the rest of us." I tilted my head. "And what did you do with that kind of attention?" He smiled slowly. "Tried to deserve it. The words shouldn't have meant anything. But something in the way he said them, quiet, sincere, with no need to prove himself, unraveled me just a little." I looked away, out toward the horizon. "You're too young to say things like that, and you're too used to pretending you don't want to hear them," he said softly. The table went quiet for me after that. The sea, the chatter, the hum of conversation. All of it faded under the weight of the moment that passed between us. By late afternoon, the group dispersed into small streets for free time. He offered to show me a hidden spot near the cliffs. Just 10 minutes worth the walk. I hesitated, then nodded. We walked through narrow lanes where laundry fluttered above us, and the scent of coffee drifted from open windows. The sunlight slid across his shoulders, glinting against the lens of his camera. At the cliff's edge, the world seemed made of light. Below us the sea shimmered endlessly. He stepped ahead, framed by sky and ocean, and turned toward me with that half-smile again. "See?" he said. "Worth it." "It is," I admitted. "Most people don't come here alone," he added. "I like being unseen." He studied me for a long moment. "You're not unseen," I exhaled, slow. "You don't know me," he took a step closer. "I know what it looks like when someone's trying not to feel something." The silence that followed was unbearable in the best way. stretched, trembling, full of everything we weren't saying. I could feel the warmth of him, the steadiness in his breath. I should have stepped back. I didn't. "You shouldn't talk like that," I said finally. He smiled, almost apologetic. "I know, but I'm not good at pretending." The drive back to the hotel was quiet. The others were dozing off, the road shimmering ahead in golden light. I watched the coastline pass by. Endless, glowing, unreal. He caught my gaze in the mirror again. This time, he didn't look away. By the time we reached the hotel, the sun had lowered, soft and amber, turning the air honey thick. He opened the van door, holding out his hand to help me down. I could have ignored it, but I didn't. His fingers brushed mine, warm, steady, unhurried. The touch lasted a heartbeat too long. "Thank you," I said. "For the tour?" "For the reminder," I replied. He tilted his head, curious. "Of what?" "That I'm still capable of being surprised." His smile faded into something quieter. "Then maybe my job's done." I turned to go, but before I stepped inside, I glanced back. He was watching me. Not with the look of a boy flirting with an older woman, but with the kind of focus that saw straight through the walls I'd built. Something in me shifted then. Something I didn't have a name for. That night I couldn't sleep. The air was warm, the shutters half open, the sea visible in the distance. I replayed his words, his tone, the way he looked at me when he said, "You're not unseen." Maybe I came here to disappear, but it seemed the universe had other plans. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of sunlight and salt water, of standing at the edge of something beautiful and dangerous, waiting to see which one of us would step closer first. The next morning, the sea looked calmer, the light softer. But inside me, something restless had begun to stir. I told myself it was nothing, that yesterday's tension was just the product of too much sun and too little sleep. I put on my sunglasses, tied my hair back, and reminded myself that I wasn't here for anyone else. Then, when I stepped into the hotel courtyard, he was already there. Leaning against the stone wall, black shirt open at the collar, camera resting against his chest. He was looking at the fountain but turned the instant he heard my footsteps, as if he'd been waiting. "Morning," he said, voice casual, but his eyes carried that same flicker from yesterday. "Are you following me?" I asked lightly. "Maybe," he said, smiling. "Or maybe fate's just punctual." I should have laughed. Instead, I found myself studying him. The sunlight caught on his lashes, the easy confidence in his stance. He looked like a man who didn't yet know what he could break, just by meaning what he said. "I was about to grab coffee," he continued. "You want to join? My treat. Tour guides make excellent company before 9 a.m. I hesitated. The smart answer was no. The curious one was maybe. I said, "All right, one coffee." We sat outside a small cafe tucked between alleys of whitewashed stone. The air smelled like espresso and orange blossoms. He ordered in the local language, his voice smooth, quick, confident. When the waitress left, he leaned back and looked at me. "So," he said, "what does someone like you run from?" I smiled faintly. "Who says I'm running? People don't travel alone unless they're leaving something behind." I let the silence stretch. Then softly, "Maybe I'm just tired of being predictable." His gaze didn't waver. "You don't strike me as predictable." "Then you don't know me." He leaned forward. "Maybe not. But I'd like to." The words weren't reckless. They were deliberate. His tone didn't chase. It waited. That made it worse. I stared at the coffee between us, steam curling into the morning light. "You're very direct," he smiled. "Only when something matters." When I looked up, his hand was resting on the table, close to mine. Not touching, not yet, but the distance between us was becoming its own kind of confession. Later that day, the group toured the hillside villages. He spoke to everyone, smiled, kept his role, but I felt his attention on me, like sunlight that refused to fade. Every time he passed near me, my breath caught in a way I couldn't control. In one narrow street lined with mosaic tiles, I stopped to photograph the view. He came up beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him. "Do you see the pattern?" he asked, pointing at the tiles. Which one? The same design repeats all along this wall, he said quietly. But each piece is a little different. The imperfection makes it alive. I turned toward him, suddenly aware of how close we were, how the world seemed to hold its breath around us. Maybe that's what you are, he murmured. Something that doesn't need to be perfect to be unforgettable. It was too much, too honest. I took a small step back, forcing a laugh. You really should save those lines for someone your age, he smiled, slow and knowing. I wasn't thinking about age. That night, there was a group dinner on the terrace of a small coastal inn. Lanterns swung in the warm wind. The sea below shimmered gold under the late light. I told myself I'd leave early, stay invisible. But when I arrived, he was there again, leaning against the railing, the undone collar of his black shirt brushing his throat. He looked up, and something unspoken passed between us, as if the whole day had been leading here. He poured me a glass of wine. I'm glad you came. I wasn't sure I should. Then I'm glad you ignored yourself. I laughed softly. That's dangerous advice. I trust your instincts more than your rules, he said. We talked, not about travel, or work, or life back home, but about everything that sits between the lines. Fear, freedom, the ache of wanting more than what's safe. He listened the way people rarely do, completely, without waiting to speak. When the dinner ended, the others drifted off toward taxis. The air was thick with salt and sound. He lingered beside me, fingers resting on the railing just inches from mine. You look like someone who's about to disappear again, he said. Old habits, I replied. What if, just for once, you didn't? I turned to him. You don't know what you're asking. I do, he said quietly. To stay, even if it scares you. We walked down to the beach, a narrow strip of pale sand hidden beneath the cliffs. The tide was low, the air warm, the world washed in amber light. I took off my shoes, let the surf brush my feet. He stood beside me, silent for a moment, then said, You know, I wasn't supposed to be guiding this tour. I looked at him. No? I was about to leave this job, move to another city, but I said yes to this last one. And why did you stay? He smiled, small, hesitant, almost shy. I don't know yet. Maybe I do now. The sound of waves filled the space between us. My pulse felt too loud. Don't say things like that, I whispered. Why not? Because I might start believing them. He stepped closer. The wind lifted his hair, the sunlight gilded his skin. His hand brushed mine. Intentional this time. His fingers tracing a line that left my breath caught in my throat. I don't want to cross any lines, he said. His voice low. You already did, I murmured, and I didn't move away. We didn't kiss, not yet. But everything about the moment felt like one. The nearness, the silence, the way the world seemed to narrow until it was just him and me, and the light between us. He reached up, gently tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered there, tracing the edge of my jaw, a gesture so tender it unraveled the last of my composure. I looked up at him. You don't understand what this means for me. He held my gaze. Maybe it means you're still alive. Something in me broke then, softly, quietly, beautifully. The years I'd spent in control, holding everything too tightly, began to loosen. We walked back up the path in silence, both of us changed in ways neither could name. At the top, the van waited for the others. The world had gone gold with the setting sun. Before I stepped in, he turned to me. Tomorrow's your last day, isn't it? Yes. He hesitated, then said, Then let me show you something before you go. A place tourists never see. Why? Because some things should end with a secret, he said. I didn't answer. But when he smiled, I knew I'd already agreed. That night, I stood on my balcony, the city glowing below, his voice echoing in my head. Some things should end with a secret. But what if it wasn't the end? For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a woman escaping her life. I felt like someone on the verge of beginning again, terrified, drawn, alive. And I knew that when tomorrow came, I wouldn't just be a tourist anymore. I'd be standing on the edge of something I'd sworn I'd never feel again. And this time, I wouldn't run. The morning light spread through my hotel room like it knew a secret. Golden, warm, impossibly alive. It fell across the bed, the floor, my open suitcase. A reminder that today was meant to be my last day here. But leaving no longer felt simple. When I looked out the window, the sea shimmered, endless and indifferent. Somewhere down in the courtyard, I heard his voice. That low, unhurried rhythm that had already become too familiar. He was waiting. I should have stayed inside, packed my things, closed the door on whatever this was, but the pull was stronger than reason, the kind that doesn't ask for permission. I went down. He stood near the fountain, the same black shirt, the collar still undone. Sunlight kissed his skin, making him look both too young and too sure. When he saw me, his smile softened. Not the charming one he gave everyone else, but something quieter. You came, he said. I said I would. He nodded toward the narrow road leading out of town. Ready to see the secret place? I don't even know where we're going. That's what makes it good, he said, handing me a bottle of water. Trust me. The path wound uphill, through olive trees and wildflowers. The scent of thyme lingered in the heat, and the sea stretched out behind us, bright enough to hurt the eyes. He walked slightly ahead, glancing back now and then to make sure I was still there. The trail was steep, but I didn't mind. It felt like the world had narrowed to just footsteps and sunlight. When we reached the top, the view stopped me cold. Below us lay the entire city, white buildings clinging to the cliffs, the sea blazing with light. The wind tugged at my hair, carrying salt and the faint scent of citrus. This is where I come when I need to think, he said quietly, when I want to remember why I stayed. I turned to him. And do you remember? He nodded slowly. I do now. The space between us pulsed, full of everything unsaid. I tried to hold on to distance, to reason, to all the lines I'd drawn so carefully. But he stepped closer, eyes steady, unafraid. You don't have to say anything, he murmured. I just wanted you to see it. I swallowed hard. Why me? He smiled faintly. Because you look at things like they matter, like they could disappear any second. I think that's why I can't stop looking at you. The confession landed softly but stayed, sinking under my skin. For a long moment we stood in silence. The only sound was the wind and the faint hum of the city below. Then he reached for my hand, not boldly, not to claim, but to anchor. His fingers slid against mine, warm, certain, trembling just enough to tell me he was human after all. You know this can't last, I whispered. He nodded. I know, but does that mean it isn't real? The honesty in his voice undid me. It was the kind of question I'd spent my life avoiding, the kind that leaves no safe answer. Later we sat on the rocks, our legs brushing, watching the waves crash far below. He told me about his childhood in this city, how he used to sneak up here as a boy, how he almost left after his father died, how guiding tours was supposed to be temporary. I kept waiting for something to make sense, he said, and then you showed up. I turned to him, startled by the simplicity of it. You don't even know me, he met my eyes. Maybe not, but I know how it feels when something finally fits. For a moment I didn't breathe. The world had become too bright, too alive. I wanted to tell him that life would take us in different directions, that I wasn't meant to stay, that he deserved someone untouched by years and caution. But the truth pressed against my ribs until it hurt. I didn't want to leave either. Instead, I said quietly, You'll forget me. He shook his head. No, you're the reason I stayed. The words lingered long after he said them. When we walked back to town, the air felt heavier, charged. Every brush of his arm against mine was a spark. Every glance became a memory forming in real time. At the hotel, he stopped me at the entrance. When do you leave? Tomorrow morning. He hesitated. Then let me walk you to the station. I smiled faintly. You really think that's a good idea? He grinned. No, but I'm not pretending anymore. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because if I did, I might have asked him not to let go. That night I couldn't pack. My suitcase lay open on the bed, untouched. The air smelled of salt and warm stone. I went out onto the balcony. The city below still glowing gold, the moon hanging pale above the sea. I heard footsteps in the alley. Then a voice. Couldn't sleep either? He was down there, leaning against the wall, looking up at me like something inevitable. I laughed softly. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, he said. But here we are. I came down. The streets were empty, the lamps spilling warm light across the cobblestones. He walked beside me, hands in his pockets, quiet. The city felt like it belonged to us, timeless, suspended. We stopped at the small plaza where we'd first met. The fountain shimmered. I don't know what happens after this, I said. Maybe nothing, he replied. Or maybe this is enough, is it? He looked at me, sunlight memory still in his eyes. It's the first time something's felt right. He reached out, fingers brushing my cheek. Slow, reverent, almost hesitant. I closed my eyes. The world tilted. For one breathless moment, there was no age, no judgment, no reason. Only warmth, and the dizzying realization that I hadn't felt this alive in years. He whispered, You make me want to stay. And finally, I stopped running. The next morning, I stood at the train platform, sunlight glinting off the rails. My suitcase felt heavier than it should. He was there, waiting at the edge of the crowd, hands in his pockets, hair tousled by the wind. When I walked over, neither of us spoke for a long time. Words seemed too small. This isn't goodbye, he said softly. No, I agreed. It's just the part where we see what survives. He smiled, that quiet, knowing smile. You'll come back. Maybe, I said. Or maybe you'll find me first. He reached out, took my hand, just once, one last time, and pressed it gently against his heart. Then I'll know where to start, the whistle sounded. The moment stretched, fragile and perfect. I boarded, turned to the window, and watched as he stepped back, sunlight wrapping around him like it belonged there. He didn't wave. He just stood there, eyes on mine, until the train pulled away. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was heading toward something alive, unfinished, waiting. Months later, back home, I received a postcard. No return address. Just a single photograph. The cliffside, the sea below, the same impossible light. And on the back, his handwriting. I stayed. But it feels like you're still here. I smiled, tracing the words with my thumb. Outside, sunlight poured through my window. Soft and golden. The same light, thousands of miles away. For once, I didn't push the feeling away. Maybe love wasn't about staying or leaving, about right or wrong. Maybe it was about recognizing the rare people who wake something in you thought had died. And maybe I thought some places and some people never really let you go. If this story made you feel something, leave a comment. Tell me which moment stayed with you, which line felt like it was written for you. Tap the star, hit subscribe, and follow for more stories about women who stop running and the men who make them remember how it feels to be seen in sunlight again. Would you like me to now create the poster style, image prompt, and the 3 detailed cinematic act image prompts in your visual style? Daylight, beautiful leads, modern coastal European setting.